Right then. Okay, so we're on. So topics today we've talked about. We're looking at testing in terms of not necessarily anything in particular. It's what you use in your program. What do we test? How regularly do we test it? Is it pool based? Is it land based? Do we use it to decide squad structures, or do we go on age versus talent? There's loads to talk about in this. Would anyone like to take us on this first, or?
Mine's set up. The reason I've set it up this way is because I kind of preempted that you guys would go perhaps slightly older. So mine's focused on the very bottom end, or up to 13, I suppose. So my only thoughts are, if I started with that, then you guys could perhaps cover middle of the road and then top end of the program, Lee.
Okay.
Yeah. So some of it's focused around kind of what, because we obviously mentioned there squad structure and how we're deciding on those kids coming into squads and stuff like that. So I've kind of focused it around that because I feel then we would cover all bases.
Cool.
So where are we? There we are. So first thing I suppose is what I'm looking for from an age group coach with the bottom end of the program. We've all obviously done it, coaching age group swimmers, and we all have our ideas of what gets the best results. And we've even had a discussion this week between us about how we put that information onto our coaches, whilst at the same time giving them the freedom to feel like they're doing their own thing, writing their own sessions, following their own structure. So there's kind of 5 or 6 things that I'm looking for at the beginning of the season when I speak to my age group coaches on what I'm looking for from them. The first one is an appreciation of a pre-pool warm-up, just making sure the kids are creating good habits as early as possible. Understanding of the different type of workouts. So I kind of explain it in gears. So I have the kids understand gear 1, gear 2, gear 3, gear 4. When we get a little bit further up the chain, there's some explanation into energy systems, but it's really basic stuff. More so I can say to them, today we're working on green, or today we're working on yellow, and I'll show that now. So this is basically the information that's laminated and put on our boards. It's really basic, but it just gives them an idea. When I'm reading the set out, I can point to it and I can say today's session is the endurance A2 or EN2. And we're trying to make that information visible, I suppose, as early as possible. Next up, just demonstrating a good attendance. I suppose you're trying to set the kids up so that when they do advance through your squads, they appreciate a good attendance. Obviously, the further you go up the chain, the more important that becomes. At the early stages, so 10, 11, 12, demonstrating a great level of skill aerobically. So I'm not really expecting it if we're doing, obviously I'm mentioning it when we're doing speed work and we're doing things quickly. But to be honest, at the earlier ages, just able to do it when there's no pressure on heart rate. Appreciation or an understanding of hard work. So just understanding that the sport is difficult. The sport does have ups and downs, and they need to deal with that the best way they can. And the final thing is just to be a great racer, so to enjoy the process of race day. And I suppose we kind of summarize that with the OADF characteristics, which you guys will have all seen. I'm going to show it just for the sake of it. So these are the OADF characteristics that we follow. So these are on our club website, and we try to, as much as, and I know you mentioned it at the beginning there, Lee, are you deciding your swimmers on your groups based on time and ability, or are you doing it based on other factors? And these 6 factors are things that we're trying to drill in as early as possible. So enjoying the journey, being driven, so making sure the athlete's determined to achieve, has a hunger and desire to display strong intrinsic motivation. So kind of making sure that they're taking it on themselves to push rather than relying on a coach rallying them. Being a good learner, enjoying race day, I've already mentioned, technically excellent and coachable. And that last one is probably the most important one. You know, when you are explaining stuff to them, are they taking that in, or are they thinking about, you know, something else? I think that's really important. So if we can try and set our age group squads up to focus on those 6 things, it just makes my job much easier when they get to me. So I suppose that we could probably touch on a few of these other things here. So our learn to swim. So we have a learn to swim underneath our squad program. They obviously pass through the stages of the national teaching plan, and then they get to our development squads. And what we have them follow, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but we have them follow the ASA Club Awards, which is brilliant for just preparing swimmers ready for squad training. So it goes through things, even at the top here, use a pace clock, set off an interval agreed by the coach. Obviously, there are basic things like holding good positions underwater, kicking 25 meters on all 4 strokes, but it advances up all the way through to stage 6. So as much as the development coach or the coach doing the development squad is doing their own thing, I want them to be aware of these 12 points here. So we're not handing the award out, we're not delivering a certificate, but I want them to base their sets and their sessions around these things, because when they move into a more full-time squad where they're perhaps swimming 3 or 4 times a week, 10, 11 years old, I want them to be able to do all these things. You know, this final one, warm up using a minimum of 4 from raise, mobilize, activate and prime. So just understanding a basic warm up, understanding a basic cool down. I'll also add things in there when we're at a competition, understanding the process of coming to see the coach before the race, coming to see the coach after the race, basically just as early as possible, trying to get the basics across. That way, when they come to me at 14 into the senior group, my job's easy. I don't have to iron out any of these problems. What I have found over the years is swimmers, and you may find this, Lee, swimmers that join a club or a squad setup late miss these really basic things. And it's a lot of work from your point of view to try and drill that in later down the line. Whereas if you can say at 10 years old, you cannot exercise without a proper warm-up, it's no longer an issue by the time they get to 15, 16, they're just doing it. And, you know, that's really, really important for us. So if I go back to this.
Loz, can I just ask a question on that, mate? Just
Yep.
Those awards there.
Yep.
Is that something that's happening? Is that like a Swim England thing, or is that something you've put together?
Yeah, no, I think it was put together by Lindsay Trimmins, Grant Robbins, and somebody else. 3 guys at Swim England put it together, and the idea was that clubs could use it. You can get it online. I just copied it all and put it on like Modernian headed stuff. But it's brilliant for like your entry level squad, and you can, you know, we talked about yesterday with Noel. How are you making sure that there is freedom within the session for the coach to be them and put their spin on it, but also follow some guidelines and some rules? And I think this is excellent, because when they're writing their session, they can look at the ASA Club Award. How many of these points am I ticking? You know, how is this session? How does this session weigh up to what this Club Award is asking for? I'm absolutely not saying you need to follow it point by point, but there needs to be aspects of it in, so that by the time they move up to the next squad, which is kind of our first age group squad, So I'll show that here. So this development fundamentals here is where we would deliver the ASA Club Award. And those guys are in once a week. And we're just trying to get through as many of those points and make them comfortable with those as possible. We then operate, and this is something we can all appreciate, we then operate on a 2-tier squad system. And I do that to basically retain finances, to keep people in the club. We have a performance tier, and then underneath we have I suppose a recreational tier. They would still compete to, say, for example, a county standard, or they would aspire to achieve a county standard, but there's not as much intensity on attendance. There's not as much pressure in terms of how many sessions they have available. They're doing it because they enjoy it, and we charge a premium fee for that. So they're paying very similar to the other squads without the same amount of sessions. So they're still probably paying £50 a month. And they're probably getting 3 or 4 sessions a week, but it's a squad for them, and it allows us, they're the bill payers at the end of the day, right? So that then breaks down into, I suppose, this. Ultimately, it's not high performance. I just want to make it sound special. I want, when you join our club and you come into the development, to aspire to be high performance, even though we all know it's not. We will have swimmers in there that are regional, which is not high performance. It's just what I name it within my club. And I suppose the further they go up the chain, the more emphasis we're putting on attendance, and more emphasis on things like how many meets a year you need to attend and stuff like that. Any more questions on any of those things? And then finally, I think it'd be good just to go through some like key sets and stuff that we do, because we talked about the whole idea was testing, right? So for me, from a testing point of view at age group, I've kind of got 4 key areas that I'll test. The first one is a set, how low can you go? It's an early season test. It's hundreds, repeat 75s, repeat 50s, whatever you want to call it. You start off, say, if it is hundreds, on a turnaround time of 2 minutes, and it works like a bleep test. So every single time you repeat a rep, the turnaround times go down. Why do I do it? It desensitizes distance and numbers. So, they may be, if you're doing it on 50s, they may be getting up to 35, 37, 40, 50s without even really realizing it. It makes them understand that sets can be that long, and that's okay. We do a basic stroke efficiency test once every couple of months, which is just your 1050s, hold the stroke count on number 1, and then try and reduce down the speed. I've just introduced this year, actually, we do a hundreds front crawl test set, which is holding a specific skill. So it will be something along the lines of 3 kicks off the wall, no breathing for 2 strokes. This is with 11, 12, 13-year-olds. So push off the wall, streamline position, no breathing for 3 fly kicks, and then no breathing for 2 strokes, or whatever it is that we set. And week 1, we aim to achieve that over 12 100s on a comfortable turnaround time. And we go through that process over a month. So 12, 16, 20, and 24 is the final week. And can you hold this skill aerobically? Can you get comfortable with holding a streamlined position, no breathing out the turn for a repeat amount of reps? And then the final thing, I was just trying to think this morning, what else we test, and it's just kick, perhaps a max 100 or a max 200 kick time. And that's always done fatigued. So it's always done at the end of a session. So we may have done 1,000 meters of kick, and then it's either a 200 or a 200 max kick for time. So that's kind of just an overview of our age group program, and what I'm looking for from my age group coach.
Brilliant. Oh, that's do you know what? I think we're probably all going to say very similar things around the ethos and why we do those things. I personally think there's a point at the bottom end where what are we testing, and why are we testing? And my personal view on that is, if we look at testing a squad full of 10-year-olds, are we testing the same thing? And the answer is no, because you've got a 10-year-old that's only just 10, hasn't even started growing yet, hasn't produced any levels of hormone or anything like that going on, and we've got a 10-year-old that's already Female-wise already started the period, you know. You've got males that are starting to grow beards at 12 and 13 now. And where I feel like putting numbers on it, it can sometimes be a dangerous thing. I think, particularly around time. Now, skill-wise, stroke-wise, I think that's brilliant. And I think thinking of ways, almost a tick list of what we're looking for, rather than it being, how fast are you? How fast can you do this? How well can you hold that? That might be down to the fact that, and also it could be down to the number of miles they've put in. You know what I mean? It could be down to mileage. It could be down to the fact that they've been doing it since they were 6, and the mums had them at the pool doing 4 extra sessions a week, as well as the 3 that they're allowed to do with you. I find Little East testing can sometimes have a negative feel, and can create instill the wrong lessons. Do you know what I mean?
You know what it's like, Lee. You can have a kid turn up, you can have a session planned, and they're absolutely pants, and you say to them, "What's wrong?" And you work out that it's because they've had a McDonald's 2 hours before they trained, right? Your senior guys, if you're taking the effort to do a test, they're not going to do that. They know what they should be doing. They know what they shouldn't be doing. You have no control over that other time out the water when they're not with you. So anything can affect how the test goes. So it's not really a true reflection, right?
I'd like to kind of challenge that a little bit. To a certain extent, you're not going on numbers. You are and you're not. So with the little ones, you know, your 10 ones, your 10s and 11s, you must have heard of the golf game before, where they do 50, 100, whatever rep you wanted to do. And you could give them 3 or 4 100s, and they basically, the lowest score wins, like you would do in golf. So what they've got to do is count the strokes, and then you give them the number, and then they've got to add the 2 numbers together, and whichever. So it is number orientated, but they haven't got a clue. They're not go. So So you give them the tools to go fast. What happens to the stroke rate, or the stroke count? If they swim medium, what happens? If they go slower, what happens? And just so it's more of an understanding rather than an actual definitive outcome. You know, what happens when you swim faster? Well, my stroke count increases or decreases, and I think it's more of, you know, that exploration kind of aspect of testing for that age. So I try and do little bits like that where it doesn't really matter what the outcome is. It's just more of what they're trying. Hopefully, they get their understanding from that. And then moving up, obviously, I mean, you was in the Salford program and you saw some of the test sets that we have to do, just standard sets. What could you do 30 100s off aerobically? What could you do 24 100s best average PB plus 10? And I do think there's value in that with the medium to upper value. I think when they're fit and when they're kind of feeling fresh and when it's programmed within the week, I think that's got to be, those considerations have got to be made. But yeah, I think for me, standard key sets and testing is more to see what they're feeling at what point within the cycle, and it might be once a month that we do something. It's flexible, you know, 2100s, 10 200s, 30 50s best average. You know, it might be an aerobic set. I have used, since I went to visit Lawrence in Canada, probably a year and a half ago now, is it? About 18 months ago, and I have used how low you can go numerous times. And the 50s 101 as well, which I picked up off Lawrence, and it's really, really good to kind of just take it away from actually, you know, are you holding this time? Are you holding the stroke count? And it kind of just blurs the mind a little bit. And for me, the kids really don't know that you're testing. I think in certain aspects, although you want them to be giving an honest performance, and you could say that by not telling them, you know, they're not giving you an honest effort. But I think if you get them to buy into some interesting sets, I think you get an honest effort anyway. And then for me, you as a coach, you can kind of then assess and analyze where you think their strengths and weaknesses lie as a result of what you've already programmed in. So I would test along those lines: 400 meter kick times, 200 meter kick times, even with the little ones. I know we said before about maybe not looking at the time, but it's more from a coaching point of view rather than actual swimmer. You know, for you to see where their progression is, you know, at the beginning of the season, mid-season, or then mid-season, and how their skills developing. You know, even time into 15 meters underwater. Not a big song and dance about it, but just record it, you know, and to see, you know, how their progression, you know, is done. I'm sure we all do the 5th stroke every single session. I try and implement at least 500 meters of fly kicking within every session, and that could just be plain kicking. It could be, you know, toys and, you know, flicks and tricks. But it's really important for me that you then kind of put that back into practice. So that's kind of where I'm at with kind of testing. There's nothing, you know, there's no lactate testing. For me, if you're testing something, it has to be measurable. It has to be kind of reliable. So I just use it as a kind of guide as to where I think that my athletes are, and what I think what can educate them a little bit better. Just moving on from like kind of Lawrence's kind of point of view in terms of the structure, I think that's brilliant. I'd love to chat with Lawrence a little bit more about that a little bit and on a different time. But moving into the program that I'm in now, I've been coaching actually 10 weeks, so it's not an actual long enough time for me to kind of revamp it, but it is something that I am looking to do. When we look at group movements, we do look at performance, obviously. But I think it's also important to use some of these test sets. For me, in swimming, you'll always get people's opinion that disagree, and some that will agree. And I think as coaches, we have to be, you know, we have to have courage in our conviction, but also have substance with that. You know, so you can back up. Well, little Johnny's got a faster 200, you know, kick time or whatever it might be. The goalposts move. They always will do with group movements, depending on the scheme's demographic, strengths and weaknesses, and you know, hubs of people. So we make considerations on group movements as friendship groups, and you might get 3 that are of regional standard and 1 of counter, and move them as a hub. And I think that then facilitates their next stage of development a lot easier. So just things like that. You've got considerations with biological development. You know, you've got a 6'2" lad who might have an 8-year-old brain at 12, and you know, vice versa. So you have to make considerations, you know, for them on a biological, emotional, and physiological kind of point of view. So I think when we come to group movements, it's a mixture of all, and the goalposts do sometimes move depending on what you've got currently in the scheme and how you need to manage that, you know, for the best of them. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's good. In terms of how we do there, I hear what you're saying, Ad, about I like the idea of it not being necessarily tests, but regular key sets,
yeah.
And sort of saying, look, this isn't the test set. So because I think sometimes test set can call it a test set, and it becomes, oh God, I've got to be, rather than we're going to do this set that we do once a month, and we do X. And last time I did it, I held 64s over these 31 or whatever it might be. I like the idea of them just understanding the training better than it being test set for test. You know, we've all seen programs where it's like, right, you've got to do a 2K test, you've got to do a ramp, you know, the 9-200 ramp test and all that stuff that have been published before. One thing we do, and I think you both touched on it, is we do a kick test where it's a bit made more a bit of a game. It's kind of a 400, 2 2s, 4 1s off a 2.5 minute base. So the 400s off 10, the 2s are off 5, the 100s are off 2.5. And the idea behind it, they have to go faster than half of the target for the 200s is half of the 400 time and faster 1 to 2. And then the target for the 100s is half of the fastest 200 is target time, and then faster 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And it becomes more of a game. Now that's probably the one main kind of set I would call a test set, because I think kicking's so important, particularly at the younger end. But like I say, I would almost say it's more important to just have those, help them understand their training, help them understand what they did last time and how they get better with it. Do you know what I mean? And compare results, and comparing results in the cycle as well. So comparing results when you were fresh and you were on your way into a meet, or if we did that set and we were in the middle of a hell week, you know, a big block, and see how those results change. And I think that helps them understand their body a bit better. Do you know what I mean? I think that's one of my sort of my ethos, my thoughts on it, really. But yeah, like you say, Noel, have you got anything to throw in on this?
Yeah, so sort of, I'd say we test, but not in regards to definitive numbers. It's more to the process. Let me just give me a second. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
So similar to Lawrence, sort of like if we look at the structure, where is it? We have two sides to our squad, to our club. So we have a Buckingham site of an Aylesbury site. Now the Buckingham site's quite small in comparison to the Aylesbury site. I think there's like 85 kids over that side, whereas like over at Aylesbury we have around about 200. We have obviously our fundamental phase is in the academy from bronze, silver through to gold. And then when we start obviously teaching them a little bit better about the process of training and sort of understanding how they're holding their skills over distance. And they go into the junior squad, so the age group squad, just like county regional, and maybe junior performance. We have, that's like a small squad or add on to mine for the more developed kids. And again, that's I moved them kids up based solely on the mental aptitude as well as the physical. So I mean, we've got a kid called not Ronald, Jesus Christ. I actually call him Ronald McDonald. Hayden Ronaldson. In regional squad. Now he's like 13 and he's just hit 6 foot over the lockdown, but he's 13. But he's, I'm going to say, on the spectrum, just doesn't understand the process of training at all. And he stays in that group, whereas sort of like his mum's fighting for him to be up there. Ultimately, I've turned around and said sort of like, if he does move up, we'll just balance that in between on an individual basis. So we might do maybe a couple of race pace sessions with me or something like that, where you can just race the bigger boys. But sort of like when they're into this part here, into the other top two groups, is where so for me, they should be taking ownership of their sport, or at least they're training a little bit more. Criteria wise, I only have they have a basic number of sessions they need to attend a week. So my group have 9 sessions a week, and I only ask them to do, like, the minimum number is 6, 5 to 6 sessions. And it's just what we call our key sessions that they have to turn up to. Anything on top's extra. And for me, when I turn and say to the guys, it's sort of like, you are showing me how much better you want to be, like how much of my time is worth me putting into you. If you're going to show up to maybe all 9 sessions or 8 sessions a week, if you're going to show up to the bare minimum, then I know your outlook and I know what you're aiming towards. But it just makes things, I think, in their head, particularly when they start getting to GCSEs, a little bit easier to sort of like maybe maintain the training through. Because I know I've been through the phase of sort of like when I was other clubs, it's like even GCSE year, sort of like all or nothing sort of thing. I'd say not very empathetic or sympathetic. And then obviously we have, like, just like Lawrence does, we have our development side is sort of like just the kids who sort of like, they have a little bit less hours a week, maybe sort of like a county standard, but ultimately if they want to drop off, it's cool. But I feel that these groups play their part as well. As I've got a kid who's come out of this group here and moved into this group. He's 15. He raced his 100 breaststroke for the first. He's never swam before. Raced a 100 breaststroke first time, level X. Went at 112. Never swam before, but he's just an insanely switched on kid. Like mentally, just incredible. Like really, really, like just he contributes to the group, if you know what I mean. And again, like Adam says, is sort of like you're looking at your friendship groups. You're looking at the core group and the group, how they all contribute together as a team. So that's the main part. I'd say testing in this top group, and my groups, like I showed the other week, we have like 3-week cycles, and we'll do a 6x100s best average kick set off 145, where they're trying to bring obviously the average time of their kick or all 6 down. And then for the rest of the kicking through the other weeks, that's their target times we're hitting. So obviously, if let's say we have a lad who's going 130 off 145, or averaging 130, when we're kicking and we're starting to go maybe like a bit of a mix set, he's looking to go 3 minutes for the 200, or that, that's his target time. That's his own individual goal. And I feel giving the kids measurables that they can measure themselves off, I'd say the one test set that we actually do, and we have a group and we try and bring it in a little bit more. Basically, it's for the hard ass kids. So the kids who compete 200 fly, 400 IM, 400 free, 800 free, 1500 free, the tough events. They do something we call heavy duty beauty set every third week. Completely processed. Apart from the last 2 400s, but we go 8 1s off 130 with fins, 3 2s off 315 with fins. And the reason that's off 315 is because I'm asking to kick past the 10 every 25 and holding even splitting, so even right across. We go 300, 200, 100, where they're setting the stroke count on the first 25 and then trying to stay within 2 strokes of that when they're going max on the second 25. And then the last 2 400s, just man up and let's go for it. And they're trying to get under 4 minutes for it. For me, and I took that off that Chandler Close set that he used to do, Joel, going into, I can't remember which games it was. But it is, I feel, a lot more around the mental process, how they're digesting the information, how they're then utilizing that in this session and staying on the ball and keeping the concentration going. And it gives me a good marker. We do this every 3 weeks. We give it it gives me a good marker of where the kids are actually at. It also makes the culture in the group sort of like, we have a board, like we actually have like an actual board on our pool side where kids who actually get into this group can get to put their name up on the board and be part of like a little bit somewhat extra and special, if that makes sense. We have some kids who just want to do 50s and 100s and don't really want to do the work and do 6 sessions, 5 sessions a week, and it's just meh. And that's their mindset. There's still a place for them, but it's them understanding that this is what I'm looking for. This is a thing that I value and the values I have. And I feel my test sets as such should, should reflect what I value as a coach. And pretty much sort of like that's a top end. But in regards to testing for the younger ends, we have something called splash galas. We run them every 3 months, and they just do competitive stuff. We split them into four, so they get assigned a team when they come into the academy. So that's bronze, silver, gold through to platinum. They compete these events, or they get to choose one of the two. So some kids in gold might do 100 back. Some kids in gold might do 50 back. And we do it as a level 4, so the kids are able to put some times on rankings and stuff. But what we do with the 4 teams is we don't sort of give out any awards for the fastest kids. We give out an award to a team that actually cheers the loudest, actually like supports the loudest. And we've got that Maxwell Madheads trophy. You can just tell that I'm not too good at coming up with good names on my Maxwell Madheads, but it's just literally sort of like the kids, like it's just a team that supports them all. So kids like short with like face paint on and all that sort of stuff, when they're up, they're engaged and they're actually enjoying the process of race day without the pressures that you usually get of parents going a bit crazy, and trying to implement that team ethic as soon as we walk through the door. But then when we move on, sort of like when we have our actual, let's say, assessment weeks in the academy, we run a 6-week cycle, and each group do the same thing every 6 weeks, and that's just how we measure moving them up or down. And it's pretty much similar to what you get like off your ASA, the ASA, like learn to swim scheme, like Swim England learn to swim scheme and all that sort of stuff. Just basically that's all it is, sort of like just focusing ability to kick, their underwater ability, and we do stick fins on them and just basically ask them to kick underwater. We do ask them to count the amount of kicks it takes to kick that 25 meters underwater, and we do that off like 115, 130. Like we just generally turn and say sort of like once all the kids are breathing normally, they can go on to the next rep. And then that gives us something solid. So when we don't move a kid up, it gives us something very, very solid to turn and say, well, you know, it's clear we've got things that the kid needs to work on. It gives the coaches something that they need to work on, or they can assess what their kids sort of like a certain kid is falling behind on or needing to improve, and just keep it simply at around kick and IM efficiency. That's it. Like nothing about speed. And for me, I think that younger end should be reinforcing the element of a team. So all of them working together through like Georgia team in them splash galas that we run. And then every 6 weeks, we've just got a consistent movement of stuff coming through because we have quite a heavy influx of kids coming in at the bottom end. Whereas like our actual top end competitive, I think there's about 50 kids in, if not 50 kids. And the rest is made up from 6, 7 through to 9, 10-year-olds in the academies. And I'd say this has been working quite well for the last 12, well, not the last 12 months, but the 12 months previous to that, it was working really, really well. We're starting to see better kids coming through. We're starting to see kids sort of like more, let's say, applying a team ethic in an individual sport, which is quite difficult in the better times because it's an individual sport training in a team environment. So yeah, I tend to just go on myself again, but yeah, that's pretty much, yeah.
That is Team Maxwell.
Yeah.
Lee, I've got a question for you. With your senior guys,
yeah,
what would you do? And I know we've touched on you don't necessarily do test sets, but in terms of race pace, so I think Noel touched on it slightly there. Like I suppose a Saturday morning stand-up set. I do an 8 100s on a Saturday morning. I do it as 8-minute turnaround, one with fins, one without. I probably do it once every 4 weeks. That type of you may do it with suits on. That type of set. What would be your regular workout for that?
We do a lot of lactate production. We do a lot of lactate tolerance work. So big effort. If we're talking about production, it's big effort with either swim down or lots of rest. So we do similar. We do 6 100s off 10 minutes. So again, very, very similar. Sometimes we'll shoot them. Sometimes we won't. Sometimes we'll do it in drag shorts, and that's depends on where we are in the season, where they need to be. I like that. I like the idea of going drag shorts, standard training suits, suited, to give us an idea. Also, a bit of psychological sort of edge when it comes to we're getting closer towards going into race. And as much as some might argue you shouldn't be doing that level of quality a week out, but if it's a swim through meet, we still want them to feel like they're doing a good job, then I'd use that suited, and they go, oh, actually, I've surprised myself there. I didn't think I was going to be that quick, and that plants the seed. Then
What's your preference? What's your preference? I know you mentioned it there. What's your preference on the rest in between? Do you prefer them to swim down? Do you prefer them to sit and rot in their own lactic acid? How do you see that 10 minutes or that 9 minutes in between? If it's production.
Depends on the cycle. Yeah,
okay.
Depends on the cycle. Sometimes I'll get them. Do you know what? That's an interesting one actually. I mean, sometimes I'll get them to get out and lie down, and try and bring the heart rate down as quickly as possible, so that they are pooling that lactate. So there's no escape. All right, and that's our ability to them. I say, look, we're going for minimal recovery here in terms of actually active. All the good habits that they know about to remove waste products effectively, I don't want you to do any of that. I want you to literally, like you say, stew in your own pool of lactate until it's time to go again. But then there's other times where we'll say, and sometimes I give them the choice. Sometimes I say, you do what you need to do. And I'll be honest, on a group level, a lot of mine will choose to hang at the end of the lane and not do it. But then the guys that are the most the best work ethic, and that tends to be the best athletes. Do you know what I mean? You'll see them swimming, you'll be being more conscientious with it, swimming down, doing the right things. And then, like those younger guys that are maybe hanging onto the lane ropes, chatting up the bed in the next lane or whatever it might be, then they look and go, oh, actually, well, I've seen him race. I know what he does in a race pool. So maybe what he's doing in the choices he's making, I want to make those choices. And it sort of separates the wheat from the chaff, if you will. It separates the guys that are going to do a great job from those
feel-
that. Sorry, no.
Do you feel though, like on that, in regards to like testing, in particular, like there's got to be a certain element of understanding from the athlete before they actually go in and do that testing? So like, just the swimmer knowing the reason why they are doing active recovery or the reason why they are doing stuff and what the actual outcome is good for the mental sort of like outcome as well for the swimmer. Because obviously we all have physical training effects, but it's the mental training effects I get a little bit more hooked up on, is them knowing the effect it's having on their body physiologically, and the adaptations that we're looking for through the phase. So I mean, like, I'm not a big fan of testing the best of times, and it's because I'm only working with like age group and youth, so I think it might be different with seniors. But I feel with a test, you've got to keep the variables pretty much the same all the way through the season. As they're adapting and as they're changing through the season, them variables are constantly changing. So being able to, in a club environment like we run, I think that's difficult to get something truly reflective of what you're trying to get across, if that makes sense. Whereas I think it is when you're in a high performance center to when you're working with just individuals, and it's on an individual basis, like Joe Igson with like working his Albrecht stuff with 6 swimmers, and he's got 6 tailored programs. You can consistently produce like the same testing environment, shall we say, keep the variables to a minimum. Whereas in our situation, it's very hard to do that, and I feel any test sets that you do is quite diluted.
I think on there. Sorry, no, I'm saying I think on there for me I allowed them a level of discovery. I allow the athletes to sort of find what works. We actually do one set. We use a pretty standardized tolerance set where we go 950s, and I'll talk you through this because anyone that's run with me at any of my programs knows about 950s. Adam probably remembers it. It's 3 at 3 minutes, 3 at 2 minutes, 3 at 1:15. Looks nothing on the board. Looks like, oh, this is lovely. But we're balls out from number 1, and then we hang on. And by the time they get to number 5 and number 6, they're absolutely dying. And then you know that they're gonna drop a minute's rest each, or a minute and then 45 seconds each time. But mine have kind of got to a point now where they know that set. And some days we'll actually make that a little bit harder, and we'll go 250s and a 75 off those off times in each block. So like 3 rounds of 3 swims, but it'd be 250s and a 75 off 3 minutes, 250s and a 75 off 2 minutes, 350s and a 75 off 1:15. And I get them to manage their recovery strategies within what they can do in there, as well as the big swim, big rest stuff. You know, the 10-minute rest stuff. One thing I've told you before, I've done a bit of work with John Rudd, talking about his methods around sprint guys, particularly when he was working with Ben and Ruta, and he said that actually carb intake is more valuable than swim down. And I was like, he said, carbohydrate intake immediately after the rep can be more valuable. Now, don't ask me about the science behind it because I'm not a scientist, but we actually do that set now where we say, right, I need you to bring a couple of bananas, a protein shake, and at every rep, they climb out, they have a drink of the shake, couple of bites of a banana or a protein bar or it's like a cereal bar, whatever it might be. And the results have been really interesting, actually, that they seem to, apart from the ones that go too hard on the bananas early doors and end up nearly being sick.
You said you have the buckets ready.
Well, like you say, I've not seen anyone actually go yet, but the principle behind it, they've actually said they feel both at the end of the set, the results are lasting longer, and at the back end of the week when we've done a set like that, it doesn't have the same knock-on effect. Like it almost kickstarts the recovery from that, and it doesn't allow the same. So it's almost one for, you know, coming into competition phase, maybe a week, couple of weeks out, and you want them to do that work, but you don't want to destroy the rest of the week. for those guys that are going to give you everything. It's a really good option. And like I say, my guys, it's something different as well. They feel like they're having a little picnic on poolside and all that here. But they buy into it because it's something a bit new and a bit different. And the fact that I've said, you know, this has come from the guy who coached Ben Proud and Ruta and X, Y, and Z, or the Olympians and national champions and all that, they bought in. And actually, it's a really useful tool as another strategy. And that then sort of promotes them getting out to the competition pool and going to have something to eat as well. Do you know what I mean? Bit of a shake, a bit of a banana, or whatever it might be. Yeah, my guys do tend to take they enjoy that one. I don't know if it's a novelty and that might wear off.
Do you think though, like, because it's something I've found like over this lockdown, where like, every Friday we've been doing like a swim education thing. We've just been talking through energy systems, the effect it has on the body, sort of like getting the kids to write sessions as well. Or if I'll write a session up on the board, on the screen, and be like, Joe, what do you think your body will go through during this? And let's say we put up, I think it was a week, we put up 3100s off 130. I was like, right, our aim is to go sort of like EM2, do like just a aerobic sort of like session. I was like, what happens if you go all out on the first 100 or the first couple? And a few of them were like, oh, well, you know, I'll last for a little bit, then I just die through and da-da-da-da. And then talking through them about what's happening to their body through that. And just on that, then like you're saying that set, I'm well taking that and using that and explaining to him, obviously, Joe, just delivering, because you've got 3 minutes of the like, recovery phase. I'll probably get them to go, Joe, passive recovery, but just spend time telling them what's happened to the body there and then. So then they're understanding what we're working on, how that is then improving, Joy, sort of like contributing towards their physical adaptations and physical improvement, and how it's going to make them overall faster. And I think, yeah, it's like, just like you alluded to there, Lee, sort of like it's getting the buy-in first for the test set. If what do I do? I used to do some stupid test set because I used to work a lot off the urban check stuff, the times and all, like the timesheets and stuff. And I was hooked up on times on stuff, and it worked for 1 or 2 kids. The rest just didn't really pay attention. But and it's like you said the other week, or last week, if you can't really explain why you're doing something, then you shouldn't be doing it. That makes sense. And we used to do a T2000 with them, and then take the base to like 100. That was like the target time for a threshold, and all that sort of stuff. And I found trying to educate the kids more, like trying to get them to understand the intent, trying to get them to understand why we're going through the cycles of what we're doing and the outcomes. And then you watch them make that choice, if that makes sense. So like you say, you've got the kids who are hanging off the lane rope talking to birds, like you're already straight away figuring out their mental mindset. You're figuring out how driven that kid is just by a reaction, and getting to know your athlete under duress, shall we say. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah,
I think it's taking sort of like, and this is the thing I love listening to you guys about, is just, I think between all 4 of us, we're completely different. Like I can go a bit too full on and like overload of information, like, and you've just got an absolutely class personality, Lee, where you can just get the kids on board and explain and keep it, quite understanding, in a relative certain term, like understanding for the kids. And I think it's finding that and basing your test set off what you can get them to buy into. Because ultimately, the biggest variable on a test set is the kid's actual intent in delivering that test set. They're going to go in not bothered, then it's an absolute pointless venture, isn't it?
Well, I've got something I want to touch on before we move on to breaststroke, because everyone's mentioned it, and I suppose it'd be interesting to see kind of which way you side. So I suppose there's two approaches, and I've heard good arguments for both. When you're looking at testing or regular sets, say you're somebody that tries to recreate a lab environment, in that everything is perfect, the set is exactly the same as the previous week. If it's 10 200s on 3 minutes, it's 10 200s on 3 minutes every single week, starting at the same time on the clock. As much as you can get close to the exact set from the same week before. I spoke to Rhys Gormley, who's the head coach at Barnet. You've seen him around poolside with the crew cut. we talked about test sets, and he said that if he's doing a set or a test set, it's exactly the same. So it's the same set every single week, and the majority of his sets are repeat. So he'll have 3 or 4 sets a week that are the same every single week. And so there's that quite, if you call that the left, I suppose, quite extreme way of looking at testing. Whereas my argument the other way is, my view is, I'm trying to get an understanding of where they are. And even within a test set, I'm trying to manipulate parts of the set, change parts of the set to get a better outcome. Now, I had a conversation with Mark Perry when I was in Canada, and he said, don't repeat this to anyone, but 90% of our job is manipulating kids. He said, there's not many people you could say that would, that would understand what you mean, but you're trying to change things and say things in a certain way and set things up in a certain way that get a better outcome. You are manipulating what you're saying to them and how you're doing it to get them to perform better. So I suppose when you look at it, within any set, and you've talked about your 6-100 set, I'm not too fussed that they did 6-100s last week. Everybody was fantastic. Everybody turned up and did a great job. The next week I may start the set. By the time we get to number 2, I've noticed that the quality of the hundreds is not as good as the previous week. Do I, because I'm a purist and I want to keep it as close to last week as possible, do I continue with the set and just allow it to fizzle out and for them to finish number 6 and for me to look back and say that wasn't that fantastic? Or do I make an in-game decision? Do I change something slightly to the set to try and get a more positive back end to the set? And I will say things. I will, for example, I'll say, right, this has not been great, but number 3, everyone's going to put fins on just to try and, rally them up. It wasn't the same set as last week, but ultimately we're trying to force a progressive overload. We're trying to get them to push themselves beyond, comfort. I will say, if number 4 and number 5, 80% of the group hit a target time, we'll drop number 6. Like, my view on testing and repeating sets is, as long as the outcome of the workout is fantastic, as long as the outcome is we can look back on it and say that was worthwhile, I'm not really too fussed on where it was in comparison to last week. And I'm just interested on your guys' opinions on which one you side with. Do you want the set to be the same, or do you want the outcome to be good? And you're not too fussed about how you change it back and forward?
I think for me, working through that sort of stuff, so like I say, every 3 weeks we go that test set, your sort of process test set, and then the 6-1s. We do our turnarounds on general kicking off 2 minutes. So if I'm setting the 6-1s off 145 already, it's a challenge to them. And sort of like, if they can do it, if say we get a lad who can hold 130 off 145, he's going to be holding a lot faster than that off 2 minutes. So that's a good marker for me, where we're sort of like overgoing on a small drill and keeping the intensity quite short on the longevity of it. Equally on the sort of like the work that we do on the Wednesday set, we keep the turnarounds the same, but we start changing variables in regard to taking off fins for some kids. So we have a really tough kid who's like really good on the fly. And early season, she'll do all that with fly, just kicking out 6 kicks, your same stroke count, same kick count. As we start to progress through the season, we'll say, right, Eliza, let's do the first 3 without fins on, next 3 with fins on, sort of thing. And sort of like, it's the same sort of, you're changing them variables and starting to increase what they do.
Who's Eliza?
What?
Is his surname Thornbury?
No. I wonder what you're laughing at. I was like, me doing that.
So are you a keep it the same then, or you a change? Do you keep it the same, or do you change it?
You've got to change it as you adapt and get better. You've got to, because you've got to try and reflect that improvement that they're getting through the season. Because ultimately, if they're doing a test set and they're not getting better, and then they're not the times and the things that you're looking for aren't really improving, then there's something you're not doing right. And the test set has got to reflect that, and they've got to reflect that physical adaptation through the year. So eventually, sort of like, let's say that kick set that we do, maybe everyone does a 6-1s early season off 145. That'll end up splitting into 3 different groups as we get on. Like, a lot of the guys who've really been progressing off the kick, and they might start doing sort of like their main set kicks off 145 turnarounds, will then drop that them 6-1s, your best have kick off maybe 130. see what they're doing, see if they can handle that, and see if we can start pushing a little bit more. Because I think for a kid to keep switched on and to keep moving that full momentum, they need to see constant improvement. It's what majority of kids buzz off. If they see themselves consistently improving, they've still got that buy-in, it's still working. And ultimately, for me, I think a test set is just, like I say, a set that you just progress through the season, isn't it?
Adam, are you a stay the same or do you change?
I've just been trying to go through it there while Noel was discussing it. At first, I thought maybe sitting on the fence, see both sides of it, and I was trying to justify to myself, like, I have done this, and I probably will do it again, where I've allowed the set to kind of peter out. But then I've also thought, well, what's the point of doing that? What does that achieve? And I think on very rare occasions, you can take the positive from that as a group and collectively discuss maybe not the performance, but the resilience that they've shown and those kind of things that you take forward. But in terms of testing something, I think you need to be adaptable in any set, really, regardless of whether it was a test set or not, and whether that's sticking fins on. If you're doing 6/100s and you need to drop that down to 75s, whether you need to make that even easier, 75, 50, 25, and just adapt it. So the kids' psyche, so you're fiddling with their kind of psyche, really, in terms of what they can do. So mentally, sorry, boys. You've just got to fiddling with the results, because you need to psychologically think about how that's going to impact upon the swimmer. What's wrong with you? I apologise. I hope this isn't going out.
You can hear you, mate. It's good. Keep going.
So you've got to manipulate the kind of the psychological effect as well as the physiological effect of what's happening. And I think that has kind of mega benefits for them moving forward. So I initially was sit on the fence, and I would kind of let them ride it on occasions. But the majority of the time I would adapt and manipulate.
Lee?
Okay, I'm change where it needs to. I think Noel, earlier when you said about you said you're one for change, but then what you described was still quite clinical in terms of change. I wouldn't say there's a difference between change and progression. You can progress a set and still be on a very clinical level. I would change where I like throwing curveballs. I like saying we like that 950s lactate set. It's nothing earth shattering, but we'll do that once. My guys have come to know now, if we do that at the front end of the session, there's something else coming. So sometimes it'll be we'll throw that at them, and I'll tell them this is the main set, and then we'll go 5/100 stand up off 8 minutes, or we're going to do that again with fins on. Do you know what I mean? And whilst there's still enough data in there for them to be able to say, right, well, I held my times on the first set, or I held my times. I like the idea of them understanding how they can compare and contrast and say, well, I wasn't as fast as last week's, but last week's was a straight 950s. This was a straight the 9 after an X, or I like them to be able to understand it within the relationship of what else has happened in the week. And like you say, throw a curveball. Some days we'll do 250s into a 75 or 250s into 100 some days. And that the head falls off them. They go, oh my God, this is different. This isn't what we normally do. And I like that. I like that idea of springing something different on them. But yeah, I think change, as long as you're working the right energy systems, and as long as they're grafting, as long as they're getting after it, doesn't matter how you do it.
Yeah.
For me personally,
that's what you want. The physiological effects, the outcome being met.
Might say something like with what I do is sort of like, particularly like saying with sort of like that kid that we're talking about, sort of like she will chase sometimes, and like when we're doing that set at the back end of the season or we're coming to an important sort of part, she'll like ask if she can do a last 400 or fly. which I know physiologically it's not really getting the right thing out of them. But for me, mentally, she's then taking ownership, and I'm seeing her start push herself a little bit more. I'm starting to see a little bit more ownership. So I'm trying to encourage the swimmers to start seeing a way they can start furthering it themselves, how they can start adapting themselves to the situation. And I feel you can only really do that through giving them the tools and the actual knowledge and understanding of what's happening to the body and the reason why we're doing what we do. So if you keep everything baseline at first and everyone starts at the same way, and then just let them all go off in their own little tangents and find their own little way, and again, it's just figuring out the psyche, innit, of the swimmer, just figuring out what the mentality is. Like, ultimately, we don't want any pussies in the group, but like, that it's going to happen. It's inevitable, and it depends on mental maturity. But it's just that constant reinforcement of giving them the praise for what we would say is the right stuff, if you know what I mean. If I'm seeing a kid start to take their own and sort of like, right, no, can I try these next 4 200s without fins on and still kick out past a 10? Fill your boots, man. Go for it. I'm happy with that. But whereas another kid in the same lane might be happy still working with fins on and still kicking under the water and still working the same quality. I've just got 2 different things going on in the same set. So I think there's a sense of adaptability there. But yeah, I do see what you mean, Lee. I think I like to have quite a controlled environment, if that makes sense, and give them that freedom in a very small box.
The question you've all probably been asked before is four sets, right? 10 300s on 4:30, 15 200s on 3 minutes, 30 100s on 1:30, 60 50s on 45. What's the difference between those 4 sets?
The number of reps and the distance.
How much sleep do you get in?
It's the intensity.
So the answer, and the reason I bring this up is because I was asked this. I asked the question, what's your view on change mid-set? And the answer back was they wrote down these 4 sets and said, what's the difference between those 4 sets? And I said, well, nothing. They're all 3,000 meters. They're all on a base of 45 per 50. There's no difference. And he said, exactly. If you're in the middle of a set of 10 300s and it's not quite working out, remove ego from the situation. Yeah, you took the time to plan the session. You took the time to think it through. Remove your ego from the session. There's no shame in dropping that down to 15 200s. There's no shame in dropping that down to 30 100s or 60 50s so that you can get the outcome or the session objective you started with. If that's what you're wanting to achieve. No, they can't do it as 10 300s. They're not hitting the whatever, parameters, whatever objectives you're looking for. They're not hitting those things. There's no shame in a change mid-set.
Spot on, mate. I totally agree with you there. Like you say, as much as my life, I wrote 10 300s on the board, I think most of them will just get out and go and have a shower. But yeah, I get it. And like you say, one thing, I'm sorry, I know we've got to get on to breaststroke, but one thing we are starting to look at Ironman swimming is, I was talking to Chris Ferreter, who works with Danny Thompson at Sunderland. He's their S&C guy.
Yeah.
S&C/sports science. He told me they measure grip strength every session. Left hand, right hand, grip strength. Before just a grip dynamometer, they just come in, and once they've done a pre-pool, bang, bang, one each hand, write the scores in the book. And they have, for each athlete, they have an upper and lower limit and a mean number. And what Danny will say is, if their result is outside of that lower threshold in that standard deviation, underneath that low, it means they're not ready to go. He said, and then he'll either adapt the set for that athlete or not let them in. Just say, right, you can go on, go back to bed. And that's part of something which we're looking at setting up a land-based testing program. We're starting it with our older ones, and we're hoping to roll it down. But that's something we're gonna have a look at. That and vertical jump height, and trying to find that correlation between freshness and readiness to train.
I presume that's on, just to clear up, Lee, I presume that's if it was a key set they're turning up to, not a recovery session, right? Or is it any session?
No, it's a key, sorry, yeah.
Speed set, yeah. So what he's trying to
Key-
work out is, have they got fast twitch there, right? That's the grip strength.
I think that's what he's saying. Yeah, I think it's a case of, are they ready? Are they ready to go? And but they measure it every session.
Okay.
So maybe it's a case of I think what he's saying is they measure every session, and then they will decide, if it's an aerobic recovery type session, they might say, yeah, we can allow that, but just take it easy today. Or if it's a key session, like, a big whatever it might be, then he would actually say, do you know what, it's not for you today. Or you could say, look, I want you to just take this easy. So I'll let you know further down the line how that actually works out. But it's something interesting which I thought I'd throw in. But yeah, once we're out of lockdown, and I'll be trying it out with the athletes. I've got a physio that's going to be working with us on some land-based testing. So I'll let you have the info and the data and let you know how that goes as well.
Yeah, definitely. Should we move on to breaststroke?
Right, should we have a look at this breaststroke? Sorry, Loz. Yeah, cool. No loves breaststroke. Go on, do you want to have it, lad?
Tell us what you're looking for. Tell us technically what you're looking for. Give us 5 bullet points. What you're looking for in breaststroke.
Streamline, I think, is the most important, and ability to keep hips on top of the water. I don't know really with breaststroke. I feel it's quite an individual stroke to the individual. I think there's a lot of variations across the board. Even if you look at someone like Rebecca Sonny, who was like the first woman to go sub 220 long course, and then you look at someone like Lily King now, like they're just completely different animals. I feel breaststroke is a lot down the sort of like fly route, where you've got to look at the physiological makeup of the swimmer as well. I do feel there's a lot of, I don't really like the whole term where you got people who are sort of like good at 200 and can't do 150 and vice versa. I think you can transfer all the way through, but I think it takes time, and I think it's a long-term goal. It's a long-term game on that front. But particularly on the breast, it's fundamentally like fly. It's coming from the kick and it's coming from the core, innit? They've got to be able to get the timing right as well. And like I alluded to last week, I feel the breathing's absolutely key to the entire rhythm of the stroke. Breathe a bit too early or a bit too late, and you're not really getting the right rhythmic movement to the stroke. So for me, even from academy age, we end up just doing sort of like a lot of flat out your skull, wide out sweep sculling, and just putting the breath in properly, and then just kicking into streamline and seeing how far they can kick again, and just focus on the kick. And so yeah, a lot of what I'm looking for really is just ability to hold maximal kick into a quality streamline and just pretty much like hold that velocity through the power being generated from the back end. But it's obviously very individual and taking. So I just look for the kick then. So yeah, basically, Loz, just look for the kick. Kick and streamline, that's all I look for.
Adam?
If a bullet points, I like timing is key between the breathing, the arms, the legs. We don't want to be having any dead spots, so that's massively important. For me, acceleration through the pull, and then another one would be acceleration through the kick. You're going to get your most acceleration through that final third of the kick. Undulation, I agree with Noel with that. As my 4th bullet point, I think we were looking for the fly rhythmical kind of. I describe it as not an up and down movement, which a lot of people would say or describe, but I would say it's an up and fall forward or fall flat, as you kind of go into the kind of driving the chest. And then probably the final thing, I like the hands to be high. The hands have always got to be high in the water, just under the surface. Especially at the full extension at the front and in the out sweep. The hands will go a little bit deeper. I also don't like the elbows going too far back. Everything's kind of generally in front of the kind of the shoulders. What I do look at is, and I disagree with Noel. I think not everybody can do everything. unless they are not willing. Sorry, not everybody can do everything unless they're willing to change the technique. I think the technique on all three styles generally changes in terms of the power aspect, the rate, the width of the kick, the width of the pull, and obviously the timing in terms of the distance per stroke. Generally, I think that there has to be a hybrid between, you watch Adam Peat on a 50 to watching him on 100. There is a difference to watching what he would be like or what somebody would be like on a 200. Yes, you do see people going out really fast with a really high stroke rate. Generally, they will tail off on the back end of the two. So I do think there has to be, breaststroke is hybrid, and I do think there has to be differences in technical ability and technical changes, and they might only be subtle. But that's what I do believe, that between the three events that you can swim breaststroke on, there has to be a difference in technique.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that last point. Completely agree. Do you want to go next, Lee, or shall I?
Yeah, I'll go. Breaststroke, for me, it's three different strokes. The 50, the 1 and the 2 are three completely different strokes. All along the same idea, I'm not gonna repeat the high hips. The body position, I think, is a good one. What I do notice, and what I try and explain to my athletes is, if you think about both ends of a breaststroker, you've got the top end and the back end being the arms and the legs. As you get faster, it becomes more front end and less back end in terms of where the power's coming from. If you watch, PT, but the guy that beat PT short course at the ISL, I can't remember his name. It's like Italian or something.
A guy with a fly kick.
It was near enough a fly kick. Over the fast stuff, the pole's getting bigger, way more powerful, and that, it's like a chop. It's almost there. It's such a narrow movement. The 100, the pull comes in slightly, the kick goes out a little bit further. The 200, the pull comes in closer. If you look at the best in the world, you look at a Goethe or someone like that, the pull's over, it's almost a skull there at the front with a great big kick on it. You look at Renshaw and those guys, and it's almost like it goes in stages. So it goes from the 50, and what I say to my guys is the 50 being a really wide, really powerful pull at the top with a chopping kick.
Yep.
And trying to fire that kick off as quick as you can. You'd like to be allowed to do fly kick, because for me that would be more effective. But actually, they're not allowed to do that, so it's got to look something like breaststroke. But it's getting closer and closer. That line's getting finer. The 100 is the middle. Yeah, it's there, and it's trying to be as fast and getting back into it as back into position as quickly as possible. In terms of, and then obviously the breaststroke, the other side being a smaller front end to keep the frontal resistance as tight as possible with the biggest power that you can. I don't mean a great big frog's legs kick like you were taught in stage 4 or red hats or whatever it was. But do you know what I mean? They're my 3 stages, and that's the sort of progression through. Now, one thing I will say is when I'm teaching breaststroke or coaching, I like the idea of, somebody said it to me and I thought, that's perfect. And it's, you pull with your legs straight and you kick with your arms straight. And it was just so simple. And I thought, I love that. And explaining that especially to little leagues. And that's what I say about the 200. 200 stroke, I think, pull with your legs straight, kick with your arms straight. And just doing that really lets them understand where I should be. I want to be there before I put the kick in. I want to be at the back. I need to have finished each propulsive phase, and then you sort of build on that. Do you know what I mean? That's my sort of.
It's like the separation drill when you've got somebody probably stroking too high in your developmental squads. It would be your next drill forward for that. So again, like I say, you're getting rid of those dead spots. You might encourage a bit more of a dead spot, but you're getting the maximum out of each area.
Yeah, and that's why I say I almost talk about it like, this is how I want you to swim 200, and then we progress it up to 100 rate, and progress it again to 50 rate. And the other thing I say to my littlies in terms of how you determine, is this 200 pace, is this 100 pace, is this 50 pace. 200 pace has a 2 count pause at the front. 100 pace has a 1 count pause at the front, and a 50 pace doesn't have a pause at the front, but you still make sure you get to the full range of movement at the front before we then open out into that next pull. They're my key points on breaststroke. That's what a coach. And then, awesome. Like you say, we adapt as we need to around as they get through to sort of the eldest ones being. There's a lot of very individual stuff that I'll change with them, but that's more around like underwater phases and how quickly we're getting that kick out to keep speed high going up into the breakout, that sort of thing.
So I don't know about you guys, but first of all, I enjoy coaching breaststroke the most, which is strange because I didn't really swim it. But I feel there's the most to kind of change. I think there's the most like moving parts, I would say. So I suppose that my whole thought process behind breaststroke and it's along the same lines as you, Lee, is that the pull sets up the kick. And that's the whole stroke. I've got 5 or 6 coaching points here that I mention regularly, but ultimately the pull sets up the kick. Kick is 75% of the movement forward, and the better you set up the kick, the more potential energy you have. So the better position you get into at the top of the stroke, ready to fire down, or whatever wording you want to use to drive forward. The better position you get into, the more potential energy you have. So the coaching points I look at a sweep outside. So I say you sweep outside the shoulders, which we would all agree on. The sweep goes beyond the line of the shoulders. From there, I'm looking to tuck the elbows, and I look to create a V. So I basically look to create a triangle position when I look down. So my elbows are tucked into my ribs. And when I look down, my hands are touching, and I've created a triangle in front. And then from there, I'm looking to force my head into that triangle as quickly as possible. So that's where I talk about coil and explode. So you coil up into a great position with good potential energy, then you explode, the head goes into that triangle. From a timing point of view at that point, and this comes into pull with your legs straight, kick with your arms straight, the hands have to lead that. So when you're in that coiled position, looking down at the V, the hands have to go first before the legs. So that allows you to get into your streamline position first before you explode the kick. So it's the same principle. It's just I say, from a timing point of view, I constantly say lead with your hands when you're going to your glide. Let the hands go first. It gives them more time to get into position, so that when you do, if 75% of your movement forward's coming from your legs, you want to be in the best position possible when you do that. And I said to him, what's the fastest position you can be in the pull? Streamline position. So hands lead, get into a good position, then you get more benefit from the kick. I always talk about hands touching, whether that be thumbs or whether that be back of thumbs in this position from the hands when they're gliding forward. I don't have to see a streamline position, or I think that's probably too much strain on your shoulders. I'm palms down, so I know some people will recover with the hands here as they go over and they take them over the top of the water. None of that nonsense. Palms down.
I'm palms together. So the in sweep is the fastest and most powerful part of it that I feel. Yeah. So you're going slow on the out sweep. The down sweep is a little bit faster, and then the acceleration comes on the in sweep with the forearms and the hands. This is the way I do it. And then obviously as the recovery, I swam it myself. I kind of roll the thumbs down at the back end as you're going into streamline. So they're still together, still got that V, but you're rolling into that action, and that's just a slight variation.
We go.
It's not even a variation. It's not even a variation. It's the same. It's obviously the palms have to be facing when you finish the pull.
Yeah.
My comments to them from there is try and get your palms flat as quickly as possible from that point. So as they're going through the glide, they're slowly, and I suppose the explanation behind that, And this is why I love breaststroke, because you can literally explain every aspect of the stroke in quite a lot of detail. But if your palms are down, and I said to them, if you press down on the water, what happens to your body? You go up. If you push up on the water, what happens to your body? You go down. So the sooner we can get palms high, our buoyancy is going to be better. And then the next one is straight line over the top of the head. So when they get into their glide position, there shouldn't be anything sticking up above the water. And then from a kick point of view, I've got 2 coaching points on kick. First one is the ankles stay outside of the knees, which helps the knees stay narrow. I don't know if you guys do kicking with bands on and stuff, but ankles stay outside the knees all the way through the kick, and point the toes to finish. So I suppose that's kind of just getting that last flick, the pointing to finish.
Yes, that acceleration.
Like that.
From a sets point of view, 75% of my work on breaststroke, if you're a breaststroker, 75% of the breaststroke swimming you do is on drill. They don't do a huge amount of swimming. When they swim aerobically, they tumble. So if they're doing an aerobic set with everybody else, they tumble into a pull-out. And that's just so that it just allows them to keep up, so that I can keep the sets together. So it's breaststroke all the way into wall, tumble, pull-out. And I find that just... it makes them a second quicker, because how many kids do you get? Float into the wall, touch, slow breaststroke turn, especially when you're working aerobically. And then I try to make sure that they have either one speed or pace set a week is on breaststroke. So they're doing, because obviously I'm doing a lot of what their swimming is on drills. So one set a week is either speed or pace, just so that in every single week they're doing something fast. And that's a full set. So either a full pace set or a full speed set on breaststroke.
I think I'm a little bit different with that. So I'm not a fan of doing either fly or breast aerobically. So I feel with them 2 strokes being quite on a sense of like technical, and there's a lot to think about. There's a lot of stroke breakdown that can happen quite quickly, and like which reinforcing bad habits. So I've always sort of like looked at the 2 breasts a bit like 2 fly, where sort of like it goes hand in hand with your 4 IM and your 4 free. So any aerobic workout for that for me is like done through obviously my free like medley free and back stuff, and then when transferring it into like race specific, we'll go 75s, 50s, and 25s, and just breaking stuff up a little bit more. So we might go sort of somewhat stupid, like we do first 2-3 weeks every season, we go 24 50s max off 130 or 2 minutes, and then we might repeat that through the season. But sort of like we'll take for example one of the kids I've got, we just try and say it's looking for potential as speed, and we'll focus solely around the 200. So this kid will be looking to maybe hold 35, 36 on a push, off 6-7 strokes, and that's the only time she's really doing race pace on that work, or if we do any specific speed work where we sort of like we are making the out sweep a little bit wider and the kick a little bit narrower. But other than that, I don't tend to go anything over 100 meters like altogether on breaststroke. I feel you're taking away, aren't you? It's like you want them to be technically efficient as all blue hell when you get them on, when they are racing that, and just that repetitive nature of and avoiding the stroke breakdown.
I slightly disagree there. I mean, I don't know if it's because I come alive and I'm on them all the time. I've been fortunate to coach some really good breaststrokers, and two of the girls that I've coached as kind of 11 to 13, 14-year-olds are still currently ranked in Britain, top 30 out of senior. I think one's swims 17 this year, and one's early 20s. So I've been really fortunate to work with these, and we did a lot of over distance on breaststroke and on fly. And I think it's about what you do. I have done 10 300s, not all swim. I broke down into the drills and broke it into it. But I have kind of gone on over distance and given those kind of prescribed drills or prescribed targets, stroke counts, technical points, and just really kind of gone onto it. But then I have supplemented that with what you've just said. So as much as I disagree with it, I have found a balance between the two of doing over distance and making sure that they're technically proficient.
I'll ask you a question though on that.
and also flipped it where I have taken them off it. And especially with breaststroke, I tend to, because they tend to do a lot of breaststroke kick, depending on how heavy the breaststroke kick weeks are, I also take the legs away from them and give them a lot more fly kick or freestyle kick if I want to. Again, depending on where they're at, freestyle kick for a higher stroke rate for the 50 and the 100, and more of a kind of undulated dive movement, still staying high on top of the wall with a fly kick. Again, sorry.
I'll ask you a question on that though. It's sort of like when, and this is the thing I feel is particularly with breaststroke, like you have your natural breaststrokers, the ones who are just, and sounds gay as hell, like just born to do breaststroke. I feel them sort of kids you can go over distance on, but as a generalization, majority of the kids I'm coaching at the moment, I'm just trying to get them through a passable, decent stroke to either carry them across an IM or sort of like just generally trying to improve the ability to train medley sets. I've come across them sort of kids. I've come across them sort of kids. Maybe I've had 2 or 3, if that I'd say are capable of holding quality across the distance. And like you say, sort of like, with the likes like Katie Matts and stuff like that, them sort of kids just naturally amazing. Like just sort of like technically just can hold that sort of stuff for a lot longer. But I feel like when you're doing over distance on breaststroke, it can be boring as well for kids who don't really enjoy breaststroke or don't really see themselves as a breaststroker, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so you're diluting a lot of what you're doing. So I feel keeping it short, snappy, and something interesting, an interesting element in there is encouraging. I mean, obviously, and I will admit this, and this I'm going to disagree with myself right now and contradict myself. When we go on to sort of like medley sets, or we do anything like with one of the kids we've got, she does drop onto quite a lot of breaststroke, where she'll sort of like switch out strokes either in the middle of medley sets, or she'll do like the odds as she'll switch out sort of like she'll go the first 150 as breast and then do the last 50 as free, and she'll just aim to hold the distance through. But that's on an individual basis around that particular kid who I feel can hold that. As a generalization, I just don't feel it's the most beneficial way of approaching it. But that's just, like I say, I think that's just me on that front.
So what was the question now?
The question being,
you started with, I want to ask you a question.
Right, so like that's what I mean. Sort of, I don't know. I completely lost myself. Don't matter.
I was waiting for you to say, so off that, then what do you think about this?
Can I throw a couple of penneth in on the breaststroke sets in particular? I think it changes. I think it changes on age. I think when I was at Salford, coaching majority age group swimmers, I had some really good, some really tasty young breaststrokers, 12s, 13s. My girl beat Ruta at Ruta's first nationals. And we used to do for 200 work, we used to do every Saturday, we'd do 5 400s of 10 minutes on stroke. I had some fly swimmers, those young fly lads would do it on fly. The breaststrokers would do it on breaststroke. Do you know what? I look back and go, there wasn't any science in that. But what it did do, it made the 200 feel like a sprint. And they had a 400 PB for breaststroke and 400 PB for fly. The backstrokers loved it. The backstrokers lapped it up, but the breaststroke and the fly swimmers got on with it. And actually, what that did for them, I don't think that's still quite low meterage. It's not like we were doing 10 200s or something like that. And I understand the idea of limiting the amount of work that they're doing, particularly on the breaststroke kick and the knees. Breaststroke knees are delicate things. But I think for the younger ones, they bounce a bit better. Do you know what I mean? You're not seeing younger ones pick up injuries the same, especially if they are breaststroke specialists. Medley swimmers, you might adapt that slightly. But now I'm working majority with senior. I mean, I've got a girl who's this far away from Commonwealth final. I've got some really significant breaststroke swimmers within the group. And what we're looking at is we break the distances down. So we'll replace a section of the swim with freestyle, but at the same effort level. So if we're doing 100 work on breaststroke, we'll do the first and the last 25s at race paces, race stroke counts, race everything. And then the middle 50, I'll ask them to be working as hard on free or back. And actually you're training the same energy system, but you're limiting the amount of damage you're doing. I don't mean damage, but you're limiting the amount of stress you're putting on those breaststroke muscles, because breaststrokes are a really, really high energy output stroke. That I find, or we break it up. We'll do a 50, and then we'll do a 25. Sometimes I'll let them have a swim down. We'll do like a 50 front end, a 25 easy paddle to the other end, and then a 25 back end. Again, trying to, and they have their race splits from their PB, obviously short course, and they're looking for, this is what I need to be out in the first 50. And if I can replicate that, I've got 25 meters to swim down, and then I've got to try and replicate my back end 25 from whatever I did at PB. I think for me, at a senior level, all I'm trying to do with breaststroke is trying to replicate race speeds, race conditions, race stroke counts, stroke rates, all of those things. And me earlier saying we don't test any of that. All of my guys know what stroke rates, what stroke counts, what they do. Not because I'm saying I've got a spreadsheet, but it's because I'll say, this is what you did, this is what... And the kids that want it bad enough, they don't forget that stuff. My top guys will tell you what times they swam on the last test set, which was 3 months ago now. And they'll say, well, I did 22.5, 22.6, 20, then I dropped to 23s or whatever it might be. Do you know what I mean? They know that stuff because that's their job. That's their bit. Sorry, I sound like I'm preaching at you here, but do you understand what I'm saying?
I'm in complete agreement in regards to sort of like swimming. And I think, I don't know, sort of like I feel training or just swimming in aerobically breaststroke doesn't really get much out, when really all I want them to be doing is just replicating what they're going to do in a race. So just focus on the stroke count, focus on how they're actually sort of like kicking underwater phase, how they're kicking into that first stroke, sort of, and again, play with the turnaround times and the intent, the stresses that I'm going to put on them to try and replicate what they're going to go through in the 200, 100 or the 50.
Yeah.
And I feel just getting them to do maybe like 10 300 breaststroke, just stroke count it through and just go through. If you're replicating or you're repeating a habit that's not really needed, if you know what I mean, unless it's in a technical aspect to mix with drills and skills and you've got a different focus. I think just doing it to swim aerobically doesn't really get much out of it. It's taking longer. You've got more chance from getting disengaged, and it's going to be probably, I feel, more physically straining on the body to be ripping out something like that.
But for an age group, I know, would you not say that you're building an engine there, the same as we do on freestyle? Because let's have it right. I don't know about your breaststroke.
I do feel we're doing. I do feel we're building the engine through everything else that we're doing, and sort of the skill work and like the key sets we do during the week. So I'd particularly on that, the only time really to touch breaststroke is during a medley set.
Sorry, just let me clarify what I mean by that. When I say about building an engine, I don't know about you guys, but I've got swimmers that are I have a group of swimmers here that can do flyback and free, and then I have the breaststrokers here, and it's one or the other. It's very rare you get one that can do breaststroke and is decent at the rest. And I do think that particularly as they're coming through, that kid, if that kid is only getting the 20% of the program that's actually breaststroke specific, then they might not get that development. Whereas if you say, right, we're going a meter set this time, and you can choose what stroke you do, and the kids that are breaststrokers and can't do anything else, and I've got one of those. She's now 24 and she's been to 2 Commonwealth Games, and I'm like, she's won more medals at nationals than she can probably count. But if she'd have been judged on what she's doing aerobically as a trainer, as a multi-stroke trainer, she wouldn't have got out of the groups below that. So for me, the idea behind giving them that opportunity to develop on their best stroke, particularly as an age grouper, isn't a bad thing. And actually, it gets them away from being scared of distance.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I said last week, we have a form select session once a week. So 3 sessions written, they choose which one they want to go with. I think from, and I know you touched on it, Lee, breaststroke and butterfly, they're high energy strokes. It's difficult to swim them both aerobically. If we're doing a key set and you're a breaststroke or a butterfly swimmer, as best I can, and it is dependent on turnaround, but as best I can, I'm trying to get you to do the set the same as every single other person in there on your best stroke, because ultimately you've got to stand on the blocks and swim a 200 fly. You've got to stand on the blocks and swim a 200 breast. And if you haven't been into those dark waters on a hard threshold set or a race pace set on your stroke, how do you perform that to the same standard? The only time I will ever change it is purely based on the turnaround. So, for example, if the turnaround times are tight, I will allow breaststrokers to do 75 breast, 25 free, or the fly swimmers. If I feel, because you're obviously working out the set based on how much rest you want them to get. And if you're working out the set with a turnaround and you want the guys to get 25 seconds rest, because that's how you want the set to work out, some of your breaststrokers are coming in and they're only getting 5, right? So it's at that point that I would add in the front crawl, but it's not, I want them to know I'm not adding in the front crawl because I don't think they can do it all on breaststroke. I'm doing it because I want them to have the same rest as everybody else, and as best we can. We're trying to swim as much as everybody else is on breast and fly, even though they're harder strokes to swim.
Yeah, I used to have two different lanes: breast and fly, or backstroke and IM, and then freestyle. And then obviously they'd be swimming the same amount, not maybe in distance, but the swim time would be the same. The rest time would be very similar, and allow them to be, to still do what you've just discussed there. Agree, totally agree.
Would this be like with any sort of like equipment on it all, or is this all just full stroke?
Just depends. I mean, like I used to alternate. I used to, one week it might be all of it swim. Depends on what phase within the cycle.
I'm a big fan of
sometimes it'd be all swim. Sometimes it'd be deload and let them focus on the skills and the drills. 10-300s, for argument's sake, they would do 6 different drills or focuses, and then they might finish off with 3 or 4 where it's swim. And I might have a negative, I might have a faster each 100, whatever it might be. So they still focus in there.
So I think in a circumstance like Loz was talking about there, is instead of changing them on the stroke if they're going to form, is just shove fins on and get them to go with a fly kick. And again, just depending on what I'm trying to work on. So if I do tend to do any sort of like arm speed work on breaststroke, it's just freestyle leg kick and just keeping the body position high and just slamming through and keeping that turnover. But I think for me, as a general rule of thumb, I just don't like doing over distance and on the full stroke unless it's with some sort of assistance in there, if that makes sense. So like fly kick with fins on, or do you like working a freestyle leg kick with it as well? Like if I'm going to go 300 abreast, I'm not going to do it full stroke like all the way through. It's either going to be broken up with drills into your progression through the distance. But yeah, again, I just don't feel, for me, over distance repeatedly on breaststroke, just solely just breaststroke, and no other element to it is as beneficial.
I think those form select sessions that I do on a Saturday morning or a Sunday or whenever I do them, I'm aiming for them all to be around 3,000 meters, an hour of continuous swimming on the stroke, but it's not, it would never be 10-300s breaststroke. It would never be 10-300s backstroke. I suppose the style of the workout comes from watching Ben Titley, just watching how he sets up a skill / speed type workout. It's very much all hands on deck. He's got numerous different helpers there taking times on different lanes. He's got 6 kids in the water. They're all doing a different type set. They're all doing a different type stroke. The structure of the session is the same, but they all have their own individual drills to do within the session. And I watched this set that they did, and it was something like 650s on your number one stroke. They all had, you know, a different drill for drill 1, 2, 3, which was specific to their stroke. They then maybe went into 425 stand up from the blocks. They then maybe went into 2 150s front crawl, working on different drills. And it was about an hour and a half set of switching between power-based drills and max speed work. And at the end of the session, I said to him, "What would you do for an aerobic? Like, what do you do with these guys aerobically?" And he said, "They've just swam for an hour and a half. Where do I need aerobic work in there? They've just done drills and speed work continuously for an hour. That's their aerobic work, right? The swim downs in between what they're doing." He said, at no point during the hour and a half did they have more than 2 minutes rest. It was speed work, but it was over an hour and a half distance. It was explosive bursts with drills. And I suppose that's what that Saturday morning or Sunday morning session is. It's 3,000 meters. There'll be sections in it on the breaststroke set. It might start off with 1250s drill, breaststroke. Then I'll go 425s as a speed burst, breaststroke arms, front crawl, legs with fins. Then I'll do 2 300s front crawl, which is every third length with fins on. 3 lengths front crawl, 1 length breaststroke pullouts underwater or something, right? It's a continuous set for 3,000 meters with aspects of breaststroke all the way through it. And the fly swimmers will do exactly the same, and the backstroke swimmers. And the board looks an absolute mess because there's obviously all the information on what they should be doing at what time. They obviously work out what set they're on, and then they go. But I'm of very much the same opinion that I would never just say 3,000 meters breaststroke swim, off you go. It's all drills integrated into it, and I kind of feel like that allows them to switch on for the whole 1 hour, right? So
yeah, I like that, Loz. I mean, for me, I look at you know, how much of the swimming, how much of your volume is drill based benefiting the stroke, and how much is just saying we're just going to swim it, and we're just going to swim it really, really well. And I think either way, it doesn't necessarily matter. You know, we get sometimes we get hung up on energy systems. We get hung up on, well, how many meters? You know, I've seen coaches with a little box at the bottom of the session saying how many were in this zone, how many were in this zone. It's like we're not Garmin. Do you know what I mean? We're not the watch guys. We just sometimes it doesn't have to be that. Sometimes it's a case of if you've spent an hour working on skills, drills, some full stroke, some fast work, some slow work, and spent the whole time thinking about the stroke. You know, sometimes I'll say, or like a coach will say, well, this is drill. Why he looks like he's doing full stroke? So yeah, he does full stroke on drill because he really thinks about the engagement pathways and just really, really focuses. And sometimes that's all it needs to be. Do you know what I mean? And like you're saying, you know, that time spent is doing more than just, it's not breaststroke or endurance or aerobic work. It's all encompassing. It has multiple reasons that we do it, and multiple uses and multiple benefits, you know. But no, I'm well on board with that.
I think he's very much, by the sounds of it, I think his opinion, he probably doesn't go more than 30k in a week, and his opinions are very much based around, like you said last week, are they fit enough to get through the warm-up? His guys, obviously, a lot of them are multi-eventers, so are they fit enough to get through a championship meet? Are we covering enough to do that? He does have one 7k session that he does, or 6.5k session in the week, and the rest of it is pretty much probably on a similar basis to you, Lee, in that it's something fast within every session. Even if it's aerobic, there's an explosive drill, or he's got them out on the side on the like almost like the rowing machine, doing explosive pull downs in between reps, or he's got them doing medicine ball slam downs. Even though the session's aerobic, right? He's very much, there should be some form of quality in every session, even though the session may be aerobic. That's kind of how he runs his sessions. Because I think everyone gets the opinion, it's Ben Titley, all he does is speed work. But when you go and watch him, like I watch one of his speed sessions go on for like an hour and a half. Just like the guys are just still going. There's 6 rounds of this. Like it's 8, you choose your distance, 8 stand-ups, either 25, 50, 75. You choose on how you feel when you get back in. And then they did a flush out, like a 300-400 meter flush out, and they went 6 rounds, and I had to leave after 4. I was like, I've got to go and get my bus, and carry on. So they do like, you know, they do a lot of work. Whereas I think everybody, because of the type of events they swim, and they think it's a big sprint program, there's no work put in there, but that's definitely not true.
Brilliant. Nice. Right, gents, shall we, has anyone got anything else to add? Heather, have you got anything you'd like to ask or add? Or
no, not really. I just love how you take it into the mental capacity and all that sort of thing. I do a lot of work on that, and I think it's massively important that we get that on board, because if they're not connected or engaged, you're not going to inspire them to work. So it's about getting that involvement, getting that connection. So I like it that you're all talking about that. I can relate to
Absolutely.
that.
I think it's become, I don't know about you, Heather, but it's become more apparent over the last 5 or 6 years how important that's become. I mean, it's regularly mentioned. Everything, you know, it won't be the first time you've heard it. You know, over the last 10 years, everything is instant gratification, instant results. It's hard to keep kids engaged. They switch off quite easily. You've got to be smart about how you put things out there. And I agree.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of work on how to reframe what you say to the kids so that they can take it on board themselves rather than it just go over their heads. So it's all about reframing it, making it in a way that they can understand and work with. And that's made a difference too. But I don't coach the level that you guys are coaching, but I think if you can get that in their mindset younger, they'll take it through and build the resilience to be able to cope with things when they happen later on.
Absolutely.
That's music to our ears, Heather, because like you say, Heather coaches one of our feeder clubs and one of our younger swimmers sessions. But for me to hear coaches that are providing me with my raw materials further down the line, to hear that sort of understanding is everything I want to hear from a coach. You know, that if we can get those things in and instill those ideas 3 or 4 years before I get older on a top squad, you know, it can only benefit the whole program. You know, so valuable.
Definitely. We all talked out.
I've got to go. I've got a
I'm
meeting
good.
in 2 minutes. I need to go and have a poo.
Right, gents. Heather, thanks very much for your time today. We'll figure out what's left to talk swimming for next week, and see you all next time.
Sounds good. See you later.
Yeah.
See you later, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys.